Welcome to the Master Your Millions podcast, the show all about your financial potential and leaving a legacy for future generations. Here are your hosts, Jason and Scott Henderson.
We have a guest we're extremely excited to have on the podcast today. Jason, who do we have coming on?
You know, Scott, all high achievers they try new things and are continually consuming new knowledge. They read books and articles, they listen to podcasts, they talk with others, and they simply do things for themselves. And a real key thing about what we do is all about the right mindset and the right team. Our guest today has a lot of experience in team. In fact, he has competed at the highest level athletically as part of a team. I want to welcome to our show today Devon Harris, a member of the original Jamaican bobsled team who competed in 3 Olympic. Thanks for coming on, Devon.
Hey, Jason, Scott, thank you guys for having me on. I'm excited, looking forward to chatting and chewing the bone on and about teams.
Good. So, I read a little bit and I've heard some of your story. Of course, it was made into the movie Cool Runnings. I know not all of that was true. However, you grew up in Kingston. Basically ran around a lot barefoot, didn't have a whole lot. However, you had a dream. You had a dream of actually being in the Olympics. Why did you have a dream of being in the Olympics?
Oh, that's a good question. So, growing up in Kingston in a rather tough, impoverished environment, I think when I was 15 years old was when I started practicing for track seriously. And it was 1979, the year before the Moscow Olympics in 1980 in Moscow, Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union. And ABC Wild World of Sports had a series on TV they called The Road to Moscow. And in it, they featured athletes from around the world, different disciplines, of course, ethnicity, nationalities, and so on and so forth. You know how when you think of Olympic athletes, you tend to think of them as these superhuman beings. And what I realized watching that series at 15 was how very average and ordinary they were. But they had these extraordinary goals and an equally extraordinary desire to achieve those goals. I was just kind of seeing how, they had all these challenges in their sport, but also in their lives outside of sports and how they were navigating all those challenges. And so it kind of dawned on me then, guys, that, wow, practically anybody could become an Olympian, if they had an extraordinary dream and equally extraordinary desire to make those dreams a reality. So that's where the desire to become an Olympian was birthed, kind of from watching other Olympians. Now, it's fair to say I didn't dream about becoming a winter Olympian, as a kid from Jamaica. I saw myself running. I was a middle distance runner, which again, it's kind of an unusual thing because Jamaica is known for sprinters. The problem is, that's the problem, right? I couldn't win anything. I'm like, I have to win something. And so I started running middle distances. I'm like, aha, that's the secret sauce. And here we are.
So brethren, where in Kingston were you?
Listen to you, Scott, talking like a yard man. Yes, brethren. So I grew up in Olympic Gardens. Most people know it as Waterhouse because it's kind of a tough, ghetto environment. Brethren, it's the kind of place that you shouldn't walk around alone. You know what I mean?
True, but I have.
Listen to you, like a true roughneck.
Okay, so which school were you at when you're doing this training then?
Man. So I started my sporting career at Drews Avenue Primary School in Waterhouse. That's where Waterhouse Football Clubs trains. And then I went to Arden High School. So I was right there off Hope Road, near Jamaica House and King's House.
Okay, so did you go to college? Or did you start your Olympic run before then?
So right after high school, because I'm sure you know that in Jamaica we don't. We're based on the British system. So, after high school, I did these exams from University of Cambridge. And on the strength of those, you can go to university or go into the job market. My thing was, my biggest dream back then was to become an army officer. So right after high school, I enlisted in the JDF, got selected after kind of a rigorous process, and ended up at the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, which would be, it is a British equivalent of West Point. So that's like college, except, we're not spending weekends drinking beers and and hanging out, So yeah. So right after high school, I did I joined the army and started my military career as an officer. And it was during that time. So if we fast forward to 1987, I'm 21 years old, and I remember walking down to the officers' mess, and I'm having this really intense conversation with myself. I'm like, so, you have achieved your big dream. You're an army officer. What are you going to do with the rest of your life? Which I look back now, I'm like, that's an interesting conversation for a 21-year-old to be having with himself. But I go, oh, the Olympics, which were coming up in 1988 in Seoul, Korea, not Calgary, Seoul. That's what I was focused on. So I started kind of pursuing that again. I would go do my runs every morning before I had to report for duties, hoping I could get fit enough to qualify for the Seoul Olympics. And around about that time, 2 Americans came up with the idea to start a Jamaican bobsled team. And they came to the army looking for athletes. And I was discovered, I ran this cross-country race. So a little bit of a background, when I was in England, don't judge me. I'm like everybody else. I used to be young and foolish. So, so I jumped from a plane, man. I parachuted and I broke my ankle. So when I got back to Jamaica, I was limping. So that's not the picture of an athlete, as you can imagine. But, I'm working my way back, and I go run this cross-country race, and I finished 14th from 40. And they're going, oh my God, he's fit. So my colonel told me that I should go to the team trials. Really and truly, not because he thought I was this exceptional athlete, but because of a philosophy in the army that says officers must always participate. And he had a bunch of enlisted men going to the team trials. So he thought he'd send his young fit officer to the team trials as well. And so I just kind of embraced that. Like, I'm going, and I'm not going to just go to be an also-ran. I went there with every intention to make the team. No idea how I was going to do it, because I was what I would call army fit at the time. I could walk 100 miles with 50 pounds on my back and a rifle in my hand. But I hadn't really done any sports training per se for the couple of years leading to that point. But, I went and I tried my darnest, and I think they liked my smile, Scott, and they selected me. So it worked out.
So in the army and stuff, that's kind of a random place to look for athletes.
Yeah,
especially
so this
for the
was,
Olympics.
actually, yes and no, because if you think about, especially back then in the 80s, like the height of the Cold War, what you saw was most of the athletes in the Olympics from Russia and East Germany and those countries from behind the Iron Curtain. They were athletes, but they were recruited into or incorporated into the army. So that was the sports was their full-time job. Remember, back then, athletes weren't competing professionally. And if you did, you couldn't compete in the Olympics. So they were amateurs just in the army training. In the Jamaican context, certainly for bobsledding, George Fitch and William Maloney, the 2 American guys who came up with the idea, did put this bobsled idea out, in general media in Jamaica. But for some reason, they also came to the army looking for athletes, and here I am.
All right. Okay, so you get selected for the team. Do you train in Jamaica, or they take you up and you What did that look
so team selection was in September of 1987, and you're probably wondering how do they select a bobsled team in Jamaica. It's actually there's a very same test that they use to select the US team. It's a little like the NFL combine. So you're sprinting 30, 60, 100 meters, 300 meters, throwing a shot put from between your legs, power lifting some weights, and pushing a makeshift sled, called a push test. So they're basically testing for speed and explosive power. And for me personally, the only test that was comfortable was a 300-meter run. That's what I did for speed work as a middle distance runner. But again, as I said, I tried my darnest. They liked my smile. They selected me. They selected 4 of us initially, and actually, of the top 10 performers at the team trials, the top 7 were soldiers. But of the top 4, the 4 that they initially selected, 3 of us were soldiers, and there was a guy, Samuel Clayton, the only civilian, as an engineer with a rail company. So we flew up to New York, drove up to Lake Placid, New York. This was September of '87, and we spent a weekend there. Saw a bobsled for the first time. Saw a bobsled track.
was it
the
cold?
US team. Yes, it felt cold only because if you live in 96 degrees in the shade and you come here at the start of fall, it begins to, like, for me today, which is clearly acclimatized, it would be like, oh, nice fall day kind of thing, t-shirt weather. But back then it felt a little chilly. So we spent the weekend there, saw a bobsled track. We pushed our sled on the ice rink with the US team. And then we went back to Jamaica and we had the same makeshift sled from the team trials. And we used that to practice our start. So we had this thing on a flat concrete surface on the army base in Kingston. And 3 hours every afternoon during the week, 6 hours on a Saturday morning, we'd be pushing that baby back and forth. So we did that for 3-4 weeks, and then eventually went to Calgary in mid-October of '87, and that was the first time we're going on a bobsled track. So first time we're really bobsledders, and we spent a few weeks there, 6 weeks maybe, and went to Innsbruck, Austria, did 1 race against the B teams from some of the major nations, returned to Jamaica for Christmas. And then we spent the month of January '88 in Lake Placid, New York. And that was real cold. You're talking about, minus 25 degrees most days, one day minus 40, But you get used to it and it becomes easy. So we did that. And then we're at the Olympics in Calgary, February of '88. So not a lot of lead time leading into, from the time the team got selected to the Olympic Games itself.
Not at all.
Mm-hmm. When you went to Calgary, that was the first time you actually went down a track, correct? That first time?
Yes.
And I read somewhere that you have a fear of heights.
And speed.
And talk me through that. I mean, how did you, what was going through your mind? Because you had this fear of heights, and here you're going to go down this icy tube of whatever death. What's going through your mind?
So I think, first of all, I think it's important for me to acknowledge that I do have a few screws loose, maybe 1 or 2 missing, right? But I remember, we're talking about, we're going to talk about teamwork and working as part of a team, and part of that is sometimes having blind trust in your teammate. So I'm crawling in a sled behind a guy who had never driven a sled before. And to do something that could literally cost me my life, right? And I just remember, being so scared to death. And I put my helmet on and it felt like it was choking me. I'm like, I can't breathe. So I loosen it. I'm like, no, it might fall off. I tighten it, but I didn't know what to do with myself. And eventually I just said, I just resigned. I'm like, if I die, I die, but I'm going. And so that kind of shift in mindset, like, that kind of resolve just allowed me to get in the sled. The strange thing is that night, So when you start in bobsledding, you start from the half mile. You don't go all the way to the top, right? And you sit in the sled and they nudge you off, right? And you're going, man, if you get in 30 miles an hour, you're going really fast, but it feels like you're screaming down the track, right? We had 3 runs that night, and I kid you not. So there's a corner called the Kreisel, the German word for circle. That's the corner we actually crashed in during the Olympics. It's about a 270-degree turn. On my 3rd run that night, I remember going through the corner. I'm in the back and I'm shouting, "Yee-haw!" You think I was a cowboy, and I'm like, "Go, Sammy, go, go, go!" I was so excited. I was hooked, scared to death still. But it's a really strange kind of phenomenal experience. Like I'm scared to death, but like this is my thing. I'm going to be doing this, yeah. And that's how it started. And you just kind of live with the fear every day. Kind of face it, I should say, every single day until you start to get more comfortable.
Now, one of the things that we talk about quite a bit is about the team around us. Now, with the story you just told, you had to at some point rely on your team to take care of you, not let you fall down the slope. Talk to me about that relationship there with you and Sammy and the rest of the fellas, or brethren.
Yeah, the brethren.
And tell me how were there rocky patches with them? You just trusted them right away. What did that look like?
Yeah, one of the things that we were very fortunate to have on that first team was the fact that 3 of us were Army, and so we came. I mean, if you want, it's hard to find a bigger example of teamwork than in the military, right? You just have that mindset already about working together, about pulling your own weight, about I don't know if you ever went up to Newcastle or training depot. As you enter, it says no task too difficult, no obstacle too great. And that's the mindset that the 3 of us military guys had, and we were in a way trying to pull Sammy along. So that kind of background and experience served us really well in the beginning. For me and Sammy, we had a kind of love-hate relationship. We kind of felt like we had the goods to become like, we had 2 two-man teams. So it was myself and Sammy, Samuel Clayton, but we're Jamaican, so you have to cut the name short to Sammy. And then there was Michael White and Dudley Stokes. We felt that we had the goods to become the better of the 2 two-man teams. But Sammy and I would argue all the time because, we're starting this brand new sport, and part of bobsled driving is learning the lines. There are certain lines that you need to take through the track, right? And it really is a lesson for us in life, right? In order to excel at whatever it is that we do, we need to learn our lines, right? We need to know where we need to be, when we need to be there, what we need to be doing, right? And I'm like, he was concerned about the finish time and the speed and the start time. As we progressed and we got to the top and started pushing off the top, I'm like, bro, the start times are going to come, right? But you could have the fastest start time in the world. If you're not driving the correct lines, you cannot go fast. And so we would argue, like, I would be holding my head up, looking over his shoulder, which generally in bobsledding you don't do, but the coach had told us at the beginning, the brakeman, to do that to help us to get acclimatized to the sport a little quicker. So I used to do that, 1, because that's what the coach said. 2, I was just trying to learn because I wanted to become a driver eventually. And that's an example of me not being a good teammate, if I could digress a little bit, in the sense that in a team, we all have a role to play. And oftentimes you'll also have personal ambitions to have a higher, more important role on the team. And there's nothing wrong with that. I was saying that it's important that in the moment that you have this particular role to play, that you play to the best of your ability while not losing, your track on this higher goal. It's a difficult thing to balance, but I used to look over his shoulder. And then there was this other piece where, there was, although you trust him, I didn't trust him 100%, because I didn't feel like he was giving 100% in terms of the level of focus that he needed to learn the lines to truly excel in his role. So we had that dynamic going, and in the general dynamic of the team, 3 soldiers, 1 civilian, and so he would complain sometimes that the soldiers were ganging up on him. And what it was is he just had a very different mindset from us, and we were trying to pull him along. So, but you're going to have that on any team, on every team.
Well, you did a 2-man and the 4-man, correct?
Yeah.
And so in the 4-man, talk a little bit about the roles. We talked what the driver does, but how were you number 2, 3, 4? Where did you?
Yeah, so really good question. So when we started out doing 4-man, I was actually the brakeman. I was on the very back. When we got to the Olympics, and this is something that's not in Cool Runnings, and most people don't know this, but we had never competed in a 4-man event until the Olympic Games. That's 1. 2, one of the guys on our team, Chris Stokes, who ended up being the brakeman, he was not even on the team at the start of the Olympics. Chris was at the University of Moscow in Idaho. And he had come to the Olympics to watch his brother Dudley race. And during the week, that second week of the Olympics, they're having 4-man, and we decided to enter the 4-man event. So we had 1 week of training. We in 3 days taught everything we knew about pushing. We taught that to Chris. So I actually started out on the very back, but Chris was having a hard time getting over the side of the sled. So I gave up my spot on the back, the brakeman spot, for him, because it was easier. And then I went on the right-hand side. So, of course, at the start, everyone is pushing. The driver gets in long before everybody else, so he pushes the least. And a 4-man in particular, it's called it's a premier event in bobsledding, the 4-man. If you can imagine 4 big guys sprinting downhill on ice, trying, at top speed, trying to get in the sled in unison. I call it poetry in motion, man, when it happens. It's just so, it looks beautiful, it feels even better when it works. So I was a number 2 guy, and I just boom, especially that third run on which we crashed, it was perfect. I got in, and Michael was behind me, and Chris was behind me, and it just felt smooth. And as you're going on the track, people think that you're leaning left and right, but you're not. You're actually sitting squarely in the sled. And so you're really just dead weight in the back. The driver is a guy doing all the work. It looks like you're leaning, because when the sled goes up on the corners, the sled leans. And so everybody leans. So you just kind of go for the ride after you've provided the power at the start of the race. And then as you cross the finish line, which means that you have to be aware, you have to be counting the corners. And when you cross the finish line, the guy in the back, the brakeman, applies a brake.
So how true then is in the movie, that third run? Were you on record time? Had you done really good? I mean, you were tracking to really do well, or?
Yeah, we were doing well. I know the movie kind of suggests that we're probably going to win. I don't think so. It was so I understand again. This is our first time racing the sled. The first run, so I'll go back to day 1. It was an old sled, and as we're pushing, there's video and pictures, still pictures of Dudley sitting on the side of the sled, kind of crossway, because as he leapt from the ice to get in the sled, the push bar collapsed. right? So miraculously, he made it inside the sled. On the second run, we get in, and like I'm right behind Dudley, and Michael comes in behind me, and his spikes are stuck in my thighs. Like, and I'm trying to dislodge. I'm like, man, this is going to be a long ride if he can't sit. I'm like, and we're crawling through corner 2, and people are like, sit down, sit down. I'm like, we know, right? And I'm trying to dislodge his spikes from my thighs, and I finally did so, and he took a seat in time, just in time before the ride got crazy. And then, so second day of the race, third run, that fateful run. Bro, we came off the hill with a 7th fastest start time. We were blazing, and like I said, it just worked. Dudley was in, I was in, Mikey was in behind me, Chris was in, and it was like smooth sailing. And coming off the hill with a 7th fastest start time, in essence, meant that Dudley, the driver, was seeing a brand new track because he had never gone so fast before. And so as we're heading down the track, I remember we got out of corner 8 and hit the wall on the left-hand side. And in my head, I'm like, okay, not good, but there's a long straightaway between 8 and 9, so we should be okay. And then we hit the wall again, the right-hand side, just before 9. I'm like, that's definitely not good. I expected that we would wave. We call it a wave. And if you watch the footage, you can see the camera is trained onto the center of the corner, and you can see the sled kind of going in and out of the frame. And I anticipated that we would have gone around and exited the corner and slammed the wall really hard. So it would be kind of uncomfortable, but we would continue our merry way. And as I'm kind of anticipating that, the next thing I knew was that we were over. My head was on the ice, man, and I'm like, oh my God, we're over. How embarrassing. I know people ask me all the time, weren't you scared for your life? Da, 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 da. No, I was just embarrassed. There are lots of people who felt we didn't belong, and that crash in my mind gave credence to all the naysayers, all the people who felt we didn't belong there. Then we eventually came to a stop, and we hadn't crossed the finish line, and just trying to exit stage left. But one of the things I can say, the people there were amazing. They started to cheer us. I remember one guy reached over to shake my hand, and I did. I shook his hand, but I had to shake almost every other hand as I tried to exit stage left. But you know what it also did for us as a team is that it made us more resolute. We were like, we crashed, but we know we're better than this, and we're definitely coming back. So we weren't, I was embarrassed, but we weren't discouraged from that performance.
Obviously, as you have progressed on, you've published some books, and you're an international motivational speaker. How often do you refer to your experiences in the Olympics in your speeches?
Mm-hmm. Every single time. I mean, I think people hire me because they want the bobsled guy. But there are just so many amazing life lessons. So many insights that I can draw from not just the bobsled experience, to be honest, but growing up in Waterhouse, Scott, and my military experience being at Sandhurst and serving as an officer, especially when we're talking about teamwork. There are so many knowledges and stories and insights that I can draw on from those experiences that it makes total sense.
Have you gone back?
Yeah.
To help the kids to follow in your footsteps?
Well, I don't know about following my footsteps, but so at my old elementary school, as you know, in Jamaica we say primary school, I have a foundation, the Keep On Pushing Foundation, and we support a breakfast program. We support a school supplies program. Actually, we have supported up to 10 schools so far. I was there last September, and 2 schools. So every year we send school supplies, and for the first day of school, every child gets a book bag with school supplies and so on. So we've done that. Leading into like kind of in the middle of COVID, we completed the building of what we would call a sick bay, a wellness center. And 2 years ago, I returned and they had an unveiling, and my name is on the building, man. I'm like, cool. It's not a tower, but it's a start. And now we're establishing a computer lab at the school, and the goal is not just for training for the kids in the school, but to provide eventually to provide training for the young people in the community as well. So yeah, the goal is to inspire even one to be their best and to to be able to come back and give back as well. So I don't know that they'll end up being bobsledders or even being in the army, but that's fine.
Do you have any picnic?
And picnic? Yeah, man, I have 5. Only one was born in Jamaica. He actually now lives in Tokyo. So I have 2 little grandkids there, and the others, my oldest daughter is a teacher. My son lives in Atlanta, making commercials. My other daughter is heading off to UConn this fall, and the youngest one is a freshman in high school.
So if you're talking to one of your kids, they're young again, and you have all of this wealth of experience. You've been able to help a lot of people, a lot of kids. You've been able to compete at the highest level. What's one piece of advice or 1 or 2 things that you would tell them? They're going into a cruel world, a cold world.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you should ask me that, because I remember years ago talking to my daughter. She go, "Don't motivate me now. Don't motivate me now." She didn't want to hear it. But that same daughter were in the driveway. She was probably 7 or 8, and she was shooting hoops, and she wasn't scoring, and she was very frustrated, and she started to cry. And you think that as a loving dad, I'd put my arms around her and go, "Oh, honey, it's okay." I did not do that. I looked at her sternly. I go, "If at first you don't succeed, what must you do?" And she goes, "Try and try and try again." So that's kind of, but so I've been able to pass, I guess, those kind of lessons to my kids over the years. But I think that the best lessons and the best way to teach and encourage and inspire them is through my life, through the way I live my life. And it's kind of interesting to see them, well, at least 3 of them are adults now, and them talking about how I impacted their lives. They like traveling, they love traveling. In fact, my kids have traveled perhaps more than I have now. Certainly when I was that age. My younger son, who reads a lot, I remember him saying to me maybe a year ago, he hated reading because I would make him read when he was a child. And now he's embraced that, So it's kind of just those things, trying to just the way I live my life, I think is the most powerful way in which to inspire them. We were back in this 2 years. No, what am I saying? It's before pre-COVID. So I think 2018, we were back in Waterhouse, and I went to the old house where I lived, and my son, he just came back in the car and tapped me on the shoulder. He didn't say a word, just like, wow. I'm like, yeah, this is where it started. Very different from where I live here in Congress, New York.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
So what's the next mountain? You've climbed some pretty high peaks here. You've told a wonderful story. You're giving back to the kids in Jamaica who I have more experience than most. They don't have much.
Yeah.
What is that next mountain peak for you? I mean, you're young. You still got a lot of time.
I've been called many things, never young. Thank you for that. Bro, so I kind of feel like Kind of. I know that my purpose is to inspire people to be the best they can be, always, right? And I realize in many ways that's how I've always lived my life, to be the best I can be so I can authentically challenge or encourage others to do the same. So in my line of work, my vocation now as a speaker is to continue to do that, to find different and new ways to continue to spread that message of persistence. It's this kind of keep on pushing mantra of growth and persistence and resilience. And then on the other side of the coin, my philanthropic work to really create opportunities for a young man like myself from Waterhouse or some other poor part of Jamaica to see the possibility, that they can actually rise above their situation and become something amazing or do something amazing. So when I'm there, I'm telling you, man, I so believe in this business of being authentic. And I think, when I speak to audiences, I'm authentic. I think I'm most authentic when I'm at that school speaking to those kids, because I'm like, hey, I used to be in these very classrooms. I used to run around this very classroom, and I've been around the world. I don't say that to impress them, but to impress upon them that if I can start right where you are, standing right here now as you're listening to me, and I could grow from here to some of the stuff that I've done, you can do the same as well. So that's the mountain to climb.
It's been awesome to talk to you. It's just, in the event our listeners wanted to somehow engage with you, I'm sure we can put something in the show notes. You reference to a foundation in Jamaica. In the event someone wanted to donate to or something to that, we'll put that in the show notes. It was Keep Pushing On. Is that what it was?
No. So my personal website is easy. It's devonharris.com. devonharris.com. And from there, you can get a link to the foundation. And the foundation website is keeponpushing.org. Keeponpushing.org.
I love that. Go ahead, Scott.
Well, is there any final words that you'd like to say? It's been fantastic, and we've had a lot of fun.
Yeah, man. No, I appreciate you guys having me on. It's been fun. But I just encourage everyone to dream big, to believe big. I know it's a big, bad, crazy world out there. I appreciate the work that you guys are doing. And Jason started out by saying no one can make millions. No one can succeed by themselves. And that's true. It starts, but the journey starts with you as an individual. Don't forget that, right? You can't sit there expecting a team to come form around you and push you across the finish line when you haven't even started the journey. So know that the journey starts with you, but you have to then go find others to help you, partner with others. You giving and them giving to help everybody succeed. As I say, a floating tide floats all boats, a rising tide floats all boats. And just, recognize, I think it was Edison who says that, whatever is, and I'm paraphrasing, whatever is in front of you and behind you is totally and completely insignificant to what's inside of you. So remember that and keep on pushing.
Love that. Thank you so much.
I have one quick request. Yeah. I kind of hid this, Devon, from my son that you were coming on. And so it was a total surprise to him to hear that we had a Jamaican and a member of the Jamaican bobsled team. And like I told you when we first met, that Scott lived for a couple of years there in Jamaica. He picked up a little bit of that one. I don't know how much. I would like for the two of you to just do a couple of sentences. I think he understands more than he can say. I really don't know. Simply for posterity's sake, he's got a 5-month-old baby, and so we need to have this on the record here. The Jamaican bobsled team member and Scott speaking a little bit of that. I don't know what you call it.
Macro. So, Barca, which part of Jamaica you did that?
Kingston, Spanish Town, Mobe, Maypen,
So which part of Kingston?
downtown, like right in the heart. I lived off of, what was it? Transitions. I'm trying to remember. It was almost a decade ago.
So, but Jason, you notice this speaking back to me in English. Come on, man, we want to hear.
I can't recall it. Jason's asking me to speak patois. I remember a little bit, and I've sprinkled it throughout.
Yeah,
but I understand it really well.
No, to be honest, it can be difficult. I remember when I was in England at Sandhurst, the guys in my platoon would always ask me to say something in patois. It was the most difficult thing, and I wondered to myself, man, this is my first time out to Jamaica and I can't remember. And I was in a town one day and I looked across the street and there was a guy, he was Jamaican. He was trained at Dartmouth, which is where we train where the British Army or British Navy train their officers. So that's where we send our Coast Guard officers. And I looked across, I go, what, Marasta? And it was like one of the best days ever because I just broke out into patois. I'm like, oh yes, I still remember. So yeah, man, I understand your plight right now.
Yeah, I need to go back. I need to go back and spend some more time.
When were you there?
2013 through 2015.
Okay. Yeah, so, man. Time to forward.
True.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thanks for tuning in. We had a blast and had a lot of fun with this. If you'd like to connect with our guest, like we've already said, his links will be in the show notes down below. If you'd like to connect with Jason or I, hit us up on your favorite social media platform. We're there. Also, if you like this podcast, give it a 5-star review. It really helps us out. And last, remember that mastering your millions all starts with your mind and your team. Make sure they are the best. We will catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to Master Your Millions with Jason and Scott Henderson. Check the show notes for any links or contact information about today's guest. Make sure to follow the show so you don't miss any future episodes.